There was one thing I liked in this whole episode, and that's some of the visuals. That's probably the only thing I can say something good about. When they showed that other dimension of the mushrooms, it did look pretty. It looked kind of like those night scenes in Avatar, whenever there was night on that planet and everything was glowing. So we had a few similar scenes here, but it wasn't much of the episode. It was like a minute or two maybe. But immediately after they go into the ship itself and everything again looks dark and ugly and not impressive. So only for about a minute or two when we first see that other dimension, it was beautiful visually. So that's really the only positive thing I can say about this entire episode. Everything else was a total mess. And you know, I just recorded my review of the Orville and I explained why the characters work, why we have an emotional connection with the characters, that it was done very well, and yet in this show, I just don't care. I don't care about any of these characters. I don't feel an emotional connection. So the very first scene we see Michael running in the corridors because she discovered what happened with Tilly, and they show us this in slow motion as if that's supposed to somehow enhance our emotions. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It makes it unintentional comedy. I laughed when I see those kinds of scenes which are supposed to be touching and emotional, and it just doesn't work. It falls flat and it turns the show unwatchable. There were so many moments in which I was just facepalming or laughing at how ridiculous it was. It's funny how they're not actually showing us Spock. I mean, they teased us with Spock from the first trailer for this season. They kept saying that we're going to get Spock this season, and yet they never actually show him. So every episode is a cop-out. Every episode is just a tease until the next one. And in the end of each one, they show us, oh, Spock will be in the next episode, and yet he never is. So this is a massive, giant cop-out. They used Spock purely as bait to try to bait the old Star Trek fans to come and check it out, and we don't see Spock. They only talk about him every single episode, and they keep doing a cop-out after a cop-out after a cop-out. So now they chase the shuttle that Spock stole. So they capture the shuttle, they show us someone coming out of it, and then we see that it's Giorgio, it's not Spock. So it's the same kind of cop-out they did in previous episodes when they showed someone beaming over, and they focused on his ear to show that it's not a Vulcan ear, so it's not Spock. So every single episode we have some kind of a cop-out like that is just annoying. Like, I personally, I don't want to see Spock, so I'm not disappointed at not seeing him. But I guess people who really do want to see him, people who might have watched that simply to see Spock, they will get disappointed every single episode because you'll never get to see him, maybe in the very end of the season. So this is just hilariously bad. It's really, I imagine it's annoying for a lot of people. And it's all pointless. Like, what's the point to even do that in terms of the story? Like, what actual purpose all of this plotline serves if you keep searching for Spock and you will never find him, and then you find Giorgio instead, and then she goes away? So this is totally pointless. Most of this show feels pointless. That's why I said that even season 1 felt better than this, because at least it had some kind of overall plot which was progressing from episode to episode. It was also very boring and slow, but at least it was progressing in some comprehensible way, like you could understand what's going on. And yet here, nothing changed from the first episode. So they still know nothing about the red signals, they still didn't find Spock, they only tease us with Spock, and nothing is progressing. The story doesn't go anywhere. They did mention something in the end of the episode about the red signals emitting tachyons, and tachyons was always used in context of time travel in Star Trek. So I guess that rumor was true, that someone said that the Red Angel is Spock from the future. That's the twist of the season. And I totally hate that idea, by the way. There's a million things they could do which would make more sense. And I made videos of that with my own theories, my own suggestions, my own ideas. And I think anyone would have been better than this. So if this is Spock from the future, and that's why he saw it since he was a kid, I think it would be lame. Especially since we didn't even see Spock yet. So they're not even showing us Spock. And this whole mission has been one blunder after another. And now they introduce Section 31, and you know, I'd be fine with the idea of playing around with Section 31 if it was done in an interesting way. But so far, they didn't do anything with it. Except of flashing us with Section 31, they keep showing us, oh, look, it's Section 31, how cool are they? These are the cool guys, these are the semi-bad guys from Deep Space Nine. Oh, look, Section 31. But they don't do anything with them. They're not part of the story in any way. So what's the point? It feels totally pointless, like so many things in the show. They're just done for the cool factor. Oh, look, it's Section 31. Oh, look, we have a ship with that holographic cloaking technology like the Romulans used to have. We can look like other things, but they don't actually do it. It's not useful for the story in any way. So it's just there just to look cool, and that's one of the biggest problems in this whole show. They keep showing us all kinds of amazing special effects and the action scenes, but they're totally meaningless to the story. They don't contribute anything to the story. A special effect or an action scene should only be done to serve the story. It shouldn't be done just because, just to look cool. And I explained in my Orwell review that in the past, movies simply couldn't do that kind of thing because they had limited amount of special effects they could do, and so they only did it when it was totally necessary, when they had to do it. And for most of the movie, they couldn't do just special effects the whole movie, and so they had to fill it with character development, with story, with dialogue, and then by the time you get to the action scenes, then you care about the characters. And the action scene only serves the story, and it connects with the story. And yet in many new movies, it's just a special effects crap fest, just a bunch of action scenes, and the plot of the movie is only meant to connect all these action scenes together into one story, but the story gets second place. And I think a story should always come first. The special effects and action scenes should only serve the story. I don't mind the occasional unrelated action scene or a special effect just for the sake of a good eye candy. I don't mind that, but it should feel organic. It shouldn't just feel that they threw it in there just because to make it look cool, especially if it comes on the expense of the most important thing, which is the story and characters. And so this is one of the problems in Discovery. I feel throughout this show, nothing but a collection of what they thought would be a cool action special effects, and everything else gets second place and done very badly. And so we're supposed to feel emotional connection when we see Michael running in the corridor, concerned about Tilly, but we just don't feel it. We don't care. They didn't really spend enough time on the characters and developing them. We still don't know anything about any of the bridge crew, like Mrs. T or Lady Halfface or Mr. No Response, or the guy with the brain bug head, or the wheelchair guy in the corridor. And when I saw him again, I almost laughed and I kind of thought to myself, are you spending your whole days just rolling around in the corridors? Because we keep seeing you behind other characters. Also, it's funny how this show is kind of stealing visual ideas from other science fiction movies. I made compilations of that on my other channel, showing you the similarities of all kinds of scenes from other science fiction movies, which this show kind of copies. They're doing the same kind of scene. And you know, I do it with the Orville also. I always point out all the things that the Orville kind of borrows from the old Star Trek shows. But the difference is that the Orville is taking the ideas, and yet this show doesn't take the ideas. This show only takes the visuals. So they see something which they think would look cool, and they do the same thing on the show. They're stealing a whole bunch of visuals from all kinds of science fiction and fantasy movies, and just throwing it all together in a blender, and they write the story only to connect all those cool scenes. For example, in the previous episode, there was a scene of Stamets drilling into Tilly's head, which was supposed to look cool, I guess, but did that really serve any kind of purpose to the story? I mean, if he simply put a sensor on her head without drilling into it first, would it change anything about the story? I don't think so, and so that was meaningless. And again, I don't mind occasionally showing us cool stuff and cool visuals, even if it doesn't serve the story. But you cannot base the entire show only on that. You have to have the story as well. You have to first create a good story. Only later you should think about adding all kinds of stuff to it. And yet this whole show is only made up from one cool scene after another, and the story is only meant to connect all of it. And so when you look at the whole story overall, it's made up of nothing. Like, without the special effects, you wouldn't enjoy it. Like, if you read this story of this series on a piece of paper, it wouldn't be interesting. If you read it as a book, if you didn't enjoy it for the visuals. I think if I read the Orville in written form, I would still enjoy it because the story itself is good. And yet Discovery without the visuals is nothing because the story is really pathetic. It's not interesting in any way. What is the story? So anyway, so Tilly was kidnapped to that other dimension of the mushrooms through that organic mass, and that's something I poked fun at in my previous review. I said how silly it is that they're using an organic biomass as a gateway to another dimension. I said that it doesn't seem very scientific, it's more fantasy than science fiction. And someone pointed out to me in the comments that this is a ripoff of the show Stranger Things, in which they always use some kind of biomass to teleport to another reality. I never watched that show, that's why I didn't make that connection. I did look it up on YouTube, and I did see scenes like that of someone going through some tree or something to get to that other dimension. And so it's very similar here, that they have this biomass that is made from something they pulled out of Tilly because she was infected by a spore, so something grew inside her, and then they took it out, and then it became this biomass, and it teleported Tilly into it, and she appeared in a similar looking cocoon in that other place. And this whole idea is really ridiculous in a science fiction show. If this was a fantasy show, then I guess it would be okay, but this is supposed to be science fiction, and the science fiction is supposed to have some amount of credibility, some amount of the ability to suspend your disbelief, to believe that this might be possible in some way in the future. You cannot just do whatever you want and say, oh, so you consider it magic, but it's simply very advanced technology. You know, they threw that line early in the season, that any sufficiently advanced technology will be seen as magic. Fine, I can accept a lot of things, but the stuff they showed us in this episode really stretches that limit beyond my ability to suspend my disbelief, especially when they resurrected a dead guy by the end of the episode. Maybe I could buy that whole organic gateway thing because, you know, they did establish the Spore network. I even made videos defending it, trying to explain it away. I tried to tie it with other things in the other Star Trek shows like the Iconians. And I also said that I like the idea of life forms living in the other dimension because this can be a way to explain why they stopped using the Spore drive. So that would be a good explanation, I guess, even though they didn't really resolve this question by the end of the episode. They didn't say that, oh, so from now on we'll stop using that because it causes damage to those life forms. They didn't actually say that. And so this episode didn't really solve anything. In fact, it made it worse because now they have a way to bring people back from the dead, apparently. So if someone dies and you touch his tears while you're jumping, then you'll be able to go into that other dimension and pull that guy out alive through an organic cocoon that you have on your side. And so basically you can now resurrect anyone you want this way. I mean, why not? I mean, if they did it this time, they could do it forever. So this could be a way to resurrect dead people. So this is beyond ridiculous. I never liked the idea of resurrecting dead characters. I think it's very bad storytelling because if they bring back the dead guys so easily, then you remove any stakes in the future. I mean, the next time someone dies on the show, I'll just say, what's the problem? Just do another Spore jump, you touch his tears while you do that, and then you go into that Spore dimension, then you grow a cocoon on your side, and then you throw him into that cocoon, and he will come back alive from the cocoon on your side. So there is no problem to resurrect anyone now. And yes, I know it's not the only show that did that, but this is something I always complained about. I even complained about the resurrection of Spock in Star Trek 3. I don't think that was a good idea because it makes Star Trek 2 less impactful. It makes it not as emotional if you know that he's not really dead. If that was his last scene for good, if that was really the ending of Spock, it would make that scene so much more meaningful. Once they brought him back from the dead, they basically ruined the ending of Star Trek 2. I think that's one of the reasons that the director didn't want to return for Star Trek 3, because he said he didn't like the idea of resurrecting Spock, because it will damage the previous movies. So I actually agree with that. I think that probably should have been the ending for Spock. Maybe they should have delayed it to a later movie, but he should have died for real without resurrection. Because resurrection is a very bad plot device. And now they do it with Dr. Colbert, who died in the previous season. And I remember how happy I was when he died. I actually cheered when he died because I hated most of the characters so much that when any one of them died, I was happy. And now they bring him back and they undo all of that. And did we really have to see his naked butt when he reappeared? Was that really necessary? I mean, we never saw a woman's naked butt, maybe except for T'Pol, I guess, but we didn't see her entire butt. We only saw like the very top portion of it. And yet here they show us a man's butt naked. We see the crack and everything. I won't show it because I'll probably get a strike for it, but they actually show us almost a full nudity. And it's funny how he suddenly looked normal, so they gave him a clean shave before they sent him back, I guess. I was happy when they had that scene of trying to get him back the normal way, if you can call that normal, through that Stargate-like water wave or whatever, and he couldn't go back, and so I was so happy. I said, oh, thank God they're not bringing him back to life. He'll just stay there, that will be his goodbye scene, and then they do bring him back using that cocoon thing, which is ridiculous, and so I really screamed at the screen, and I facepalmed, and I said, oh no, so what's the point of his character? And I guess one of the reasons they're doing that is to redeem Vok, or Ash Tyler, whatever his name is, because he killed him, and so he feels guilty, and everybody hates him because of that. I guess no one hates him, except for Stamens, I guess. No one really hated him after he killed that guy, no one cared. So anyway, so I guess that's been done also to redeem that character, because they want to bring him back as a regular, I guess. So they have to bring back his victim, and the Vok Tyler is now in Section 31 as well. Oh, don't get me started on Section 31. This was totally ridiculous. This is worse than I imagined, because when they showed us the trailers and they showed everybody talking about Section 31, even back then I thought that's pretty stupid, but I imagined that they'll explain it somehow. I imagined that someone will tell them about Section 31. Maybe Giorgio, maybe for the mission, someone will have the need to tell them about it. And that's why they all know about it. And yet, what do we see in the actual show? That they all knew about Section 31 from ages ago. Like, it wasn't a surprise for them. So Giorgio shows up, she shows everybody the black badge, and everybody immediately knows what it is, and even Michael says, oh, Section 31. And earlier in the previous episode, Vok also knew all about it without being told. So Giorgio doesn't even tell anyone what it is, what it's about. Everybody knows it already, and this is a top secret organization that no one knew about in Deep Space Nine when it was first introduced. No one knew about it. Bashir had no idea what it is. He said he never heard about it. Even Cisco said he never heard about it. And later, even the Romulans were said not to know anything about it. The Romulans didn't know it exists. And don't you think the Romulans probably have a lot of spies in the Federation, their biggest enemies? So wouldn't the Romulans know about the existence of Section 31? And yet even they didn't know that. And they certainly didn't go around carrying a special badge to identify themselves in front of everybody. So this is simply hilariously bad. And later they even go out in the corridor and they talk about it in the corridor so that all the minor crew members can hear about it as well. So they walk the corridor and they talk about Section 31 within earshot of everybody in the corridors. Even that wheelchair guy who keeps rolling in the background in every single episode because he's always in the background somewhere. Maybe that's a spy. Maybe he's a Romulan spy. He wants to overhear what they say about Section 31. That's why he's always rolling around the main characters, always in the background. So that's my explanation for that. That's a Romulan spy right there. He always tries to overhear what secrets they'll reveal. So anyway, the Discovery jumps into that other dimension, but only a partial jump, and so they get stuck inside that other reality. And then that Section 31 ship actually saves them with a tractor beam. So wait a minute, so the Discovery is still in the normal space, that it can be seen by other ships? It doesn't really make sense. I mean, we see that biomass, that fluidic space thing, so is that become visible for other ships as well? Does the Section 31 ship actually sees that other dimension as well? It doesn't make any sense. This whole thing doesn't make any kind of sense. This is a fantasy, like in that Pirates of the Caribbean movie, in which they flipped their ship upside down to go to another reality. This is the same kind of level of fantasy, so it's really hard to suspend my disbelief and to accept what they're showing us, because the way they did it is really bad. It doesn't make sense, and the whole thing with May doesn't make sense. I mean, if she can talk with those other creatures, then why didn't she tell them not to eat the Discovery? Because Tilly asks her and she agrees, and yet those creatures eat the Discovery anyway, so why didn't they listen? So nothing makes sense. Everything keeps contradicting itself in this show, and so this is just terrible. And anyway, they tell Tilly about a monster which is destroying their ecosystem, but in the previous episode they said that Discovery itself is the monster. They said the Discovery is the one ruining their ecosystem. So that doctor guy was the problem, so now that they took him out of it, so there is no problem anymore. I think it would make more sense to bring Lorca back, because he actually physically fell into that network, while that doctor guy actually died and we saw his physical body being dead on the Discovery, and we don't know what they did with it. Maybe he's still frozen in their morgue or something. So isn't that strange? How does that make sense if his physical body is still on the Discovery, and yet they now take him back from the dead with a new physical body? So I guess this way they can also make copies of people, endless copies. So I think it would make more sense to bring Lorca back. So I kind of expected maybe they'll show Lorca, maybe Lorca is the monster. I didn't feel any emotional connection. Like, I was supposed to be happy when Dr. Colbert resurrected. I was angry, I wasn't happy. This is terrible for the show. They should kill off more characters, not bring back all the dead ones. The only one they should bring back is Captain Lorca, which is probably the only one they will not bring back. And apparently they are really setting up a Section 31 show, which I think would be terrible. Part of the reason that this show wasn't really accepted by Star Trek fans is that it didn't really feel like a Star Trek show. The whole war plot being all about the war, all the characters being nasty in the first few episodes, that's I think one of the reasons that many people turned away from this. This is not the type of show that Star Trek fans wanted to see. That's why they all went to see the Orville instead, because the Orville does have that optimistic future, those friendly characters, the comedy, all the nice things from Star Trek. And yet in this show it was always dark, all the characters were annoying in the beginning, the whole plot was not really a Star Trek kind of plot. And so I guess they didn't get what didn't work, and so they're now doing something even worse, planning to do a Section 31 show about a group of villains, and apparently they have no idea what Section 31 even is. So the writers didn't actually bother to even rewatch those few episodes in which they were introduced, because if they did, they will know that this is not a covert a part of Starfleet. They are not working for Starfleet. They're a separate organization that no one even knows about. And yet now they show us that they are directly working for Starfleet. They show us that female admiral from the previous season, and they show her giving orders to Section 31. So this is nonsense. This doesn't fit at all with the continuity. It doesn't make sense because Bashir said he never heard about Section 31. So we cannot even say that, maybe because it's a prequel, so maybe in the past, during this time period, maybe back then Section 31 was an official arm of Starfleet, but Bashir said he never heard about it. And the same Sisko also. He never heard about it. That it was only mentioned in the original charter for the Federation, but presumably never implemented. So no one should know about it. And I'm not against it existing. I'm not against even some admirals colluding with them. That was always the case. That's fine. So if they show that admiral colluding with them, that's fine. But her giving them orders and knowing all about them and calling them a branch of Starfleet and saying that Starfleet is involved in nation building. So she's basically admitting that Starfleet is sanctioning all of this and that they are interfering in other planets, which is against the Prime Directive. It makes the whole of Starfleet look bad now. So they're ruining the whole idea of Starfleet, and they're making Section 31 to be the heroes instead of the villains, and they're making them just into, secret agents like James Bond. So this is not what it's supposed to be. So I'm really not getting it. And by the way, I hate Giorgio. I just hate her attitude. I hate the way she behaves. I hate everything about her. If it was Lorca doing all of this, maybe I would be more forgiving of it, because I loved Lorca and he was that type of a Section 31 agent. So if that was Lorca here, maybe I wouldn't be as angry. But Giorgio is just annoying, and everybody knows who she is, except for Pike, I guess. But everybody on the ship knows that she's the evil space Hitler from the Mirror Universe. So who in their right mind would even trust her? And the way that she's playing this character as an annoying, bitchy woman is just, it doesn't work at all in my opinion. I hate that character, and I wouldn't want to see any kind of series with that character in it. And the other Section 31 guy also is annoying and stupid and just terrible. So this is probably one of the worst episodes of the show, and it's just terrible in every way. So this has been my thoughts on this topic. Let me know what you think in the comments below and we can discuss it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.